Greetings. My name is Jalandra A. Davis, otherwise known as Mommy Melusine. I am a writer, scholar, educator, dancer, mermaid enthusiast, and all around creative. Welcome to the Merwomanist Podcast, where we talk about Black mermaid lore, fantasy, spirituality, and aquatic culture. Dive in and enjoy. If you are watching the video version of this, I am wearing my crown and I have my wand because today we are talking about the rest of season 2 of House of Dragons. House of the Dragon, formerly House of Dragons, is what Black folks call it. What do I think? What do I think of this second season? And my comments are going to assume that you watched it or you're interested enough in either the show or me to have some idea of what's going on. I'm not going to do any explaining or backstory of the characters. So, what do I think of season 2? Because there have been mixed reviews, particularly of that finale. Let me say this. This is undoubtedly a good show, a great show, even. It is incredible in terms of the quality, the epic scale, and the scope. There's just nothing like the Game of Thrones franchise on television. And I have attempted most of the fantasy series that have come out in the Game of Thrones. I tried to watch Rings of Power, I tried to watch Witcher, I tried to watch Wheel of Time, and just none of them sucked me in and held my attention the way that Game of Thrones did. And I was excited to go back into that world for House of the Dragon. And to me, the first season did not at all disappoint. I thought it was great. This second season, I would not say that it wasn't good, but I would say that it had high moments and it had what the hell moments. It was uneven. I feel like it was uneven. I still really enjoyed it. It's still pretty much the only show I'm really watching that is on TV right now. When I have time to watch TV, I think I just don't have the patience to try things, right? So I know there's a lot of great TV. People are always saying, try this or try that. I just don't have the patience. If I'm not sucked into it and can't wait to see the next one by the end of the first episode, then I will never watch it again because I just don't have time. I basically get an hour to myself at the end of each day, if that, and I don't want to spend it on something that I'm not going to be invested in. So typically I will go back and watch older things that I already know I enjoy, right? So House of Dragons is pretty much the only show I'm watching right now that isn't something that's been in syndication for years. And there's a reason for it. I'm not watching it for nothing. And I'm not hate watching it, certainly. I look forward to it every week, even if I have a lot of questions about this season. So I have notes because I'm a teacher, right? And I really want to try to dissect some of the things that I think were going on with this season that have caused it to have such a mixed reception for the fans. So let's talk about the things I did like first. I think generally the writing is good. I had some questions, but I feel like those are more questions for the showrunners. If I'm right about this, I don't know a whole lot about television production, but if I'm right, the showrunners generally decide the direction of where things are going to go and what's going to happen. And then different writers write episodes, but they have to write to what's already laid out for them that's supposed to happen in a given episode, in a given scene. So I think that for what they were given, for the various plot turns and the scenes and the interactions between the characters, I generally think the writing on this show is great. The dialogue and the reveries and the poetry of many of the lines, a lot of the character interactions are really interesting and really good. I particularly this season enjoyed the Valarians. And I know they're the Black people, so yeah, I'm going to enjoy them anyway. But I felt like the actual Black people from the Valarians, we hadn't really gotten much from anyone except Orless on the previous season. We got a little bit of Lena, we got some Lenore, but I thought this season we got more from Corliss's sons, these bastard sons, Alan and Adam, particularly Alan. So I thought that they were very interesting, very well drawn, fully realized characters who you really are rooting for and really don't want anything to happen to. I think Jayla is incredible. The one complaint I have about Jayla is I feel like pretty much every scene that where we've seen Jayla play a major role, she is supporting or comforting or pep talking someone else. And I'd like to see more of Jayla, like her motivations, her desires. I know she's not a big character in the books or the series, but I don't know. It would have been nice in the episode after the death of Rhaenys to maybe have a scene of Jayla alone mourning her grandmother before she goes into comfort mode for everyone else. But I think she's a great character, and it's so wonderful to see a Black girl on TV in this kind of role. And she's just always speaking sense, right, to the men around her. Lyra's strong. I think he's despicable. Like, he did some incredible things first season, and the character just made my skin crawl. But I think he's a good character. I think he's a good character, and his interactions with the other characters are always very interesting because he is such a strategist. So every time Laris is in a scene, you're getting a sense of that complex, delicate politics that made the original Game of Thrones series so great. Aegon's been killing it. Aegon, another character, absolutely despicable first season, and into the second season as well, makes my skin crawl. He's an ingrate, he's a deviant, he's a rapist, let's not forget. However, he has layers. Aegon has layers. He has depth. He's still not a good person, but there's a depth and a dimensionality to the character and the way that Tom Glenn Carney is playing him. And in the last episode, when he said that we're all grown here, right? When he said his penis swelled up like a sausage and blew up, I cannot lie. I did feel sorry for him. I did feel sorry for him, even though he probably deserved that given what he did to serving girls in the first season. Yeah, so there is some great writing. There's some great stuff going on. The quality of the show, dragons look and sound incredible. They all have such distinctive faces and voices and personalities. And to bring CGI characters who aren't actually there to life that way is just amazing. I think everything looks beautiful. It looks rich. The costuming, the landscapes. I think it looks gorgeous. I don't mind the fact that the show is taking its time. I just think we needed, if you were going to take so much time on season, we needed some payoff in the end that we didn't get. But I don't mind that it's taking its time. So, what are the problems? After I watched the episode, I also watched all the behind the scenes material. I also listen to the official podcast, which often features interviews with one of the actors, with the directors of episodes, set designers, different people involved in the behind the scenes. And the final finale also had an interview with the showrunner. So listening to the showrunners talk talk in particular about the show, I think part of the problem is there is a big disconnect between what the people who make the show think is going to just really impact and connect with the viewers and what the viewers actually care about. Showrunners are obsessed with Damon. I think Matt Smith is the actor's name. I think he's a well-known actor. He was on The Crown, which isn't something I watched, so I didn't know about that. But I think that they're putting a lot of money on Matt Smith and Damon. And he's a fun, chaotic, sometimes villainous, sometimes an ally. He's an interesting character, but I don't know if he's as interesting as they think he is. And that full season arc of him having nightmares all over Harrenhal just to do what he was supposed to do in the first place and be loyal to his wife was just, it was belabored. It was drawn out. It was repetitive. And it really is a travesty to me that we gave so much screen time to that while barely developing other characters, Reina, for example, whose storyline is dramatically changed for the books. And I think that if you were going to make that dramatic change, they needed to take more time and care with the character. So, yeah, they think that we care about Damon. and we don't actually, I mean, we care, but like not that much. Not a whole season of nightmares, not a whole season. They think that we care about Alice Rivers. They think that that's a hit. They think that's a character people are just going to love and respond to and want to see more of. And felt, and even from seeing a lot of the reactions to some of the other fans, that the most fun people to watch in the Riverlands were Simon Strong and Oscar Tully, young Oscar Tully, right? And I think that scene with Oscar Tully checking Damon, committing to Rhaenyra's cause, but also checking Damon and also doing justice on behalf of the houses that were harmed by Damon's tactics. I thought that scene was brilliant, and it was one of my favorite scenes in the whole second season. And it was one of the examples of the kind of thing you want to see from this franchise, which are these political maneuvers, right? So that scene didn't have any magic, it didn't have any dragons. It was just political maneuvering of different people trying to get what they wanted and realizing how they have to interact with one another to get it. And I thought it was brilliant. And Oscar Tully in that scene saying Damon was told that he had to execute this guy who had been loyal to him, it was just priceless. They think that we care about Damon and we don't care as much as they think. They think that we care about Alice Rivers and we really love Oscar and Simon Strong. They think that we care about redemption arcs and characters doing the right thing, when what we actually want from a show like Game of Thrones is for them to stay morally gray. So we got this kind of, I guess, was supposed to be a redemption arc with Damon, where he actually, I guess, is supposed to feel guilty about killing this baby in his bed, but I don't know. I don't get the sense that Damon is the kind of man who really would feel guilty about that, right? Which is terrible, but it's true. I do appreciate the stuff with him and his brother and that kind the way they reconciled through the dreams, but I just felt like it went on too long. I felt like him comforting his brother after Emma's death in his dream, that could have been the end of it. I thought that the scene after the execution when his brother offers him the crown and says, "Do you still want it?" I was like, okay, because that's sort of bringing home this idea of, does he even really want to be king? Or is he just like a chaos demon who doesn't like to be told what to do? And the only person who doesn't have to be told what to do is the king. Or is he acting out of actual desire? Or is he just acting out of resentment for being passed over? So I could have kept it there. We did not need the last vision with the Game of Thrones clips. We did not need that. And I kind of hated it. And I really hate the references to the Song of Ice and Fire. And I'm going to come back to that at the end of my review and why I hate it so much. It seemed like it wanted to give us a redemption arc with Damon. It gave us a redemption arc with Allison. Those scenes in that episode of Allison going into the woods and bathing in the river, that Ophelia-like scene of her floating, walking through the fields, though it was very beautiful, but I don't know. One of the things I've been doing, I've been rewatching season 1 alongside it, and it's reminding me of who the characters were in season 1. And Allison, after the time jump, when we get the adult Allison Rhaenyra, she was vicious. Allison was unhinged. She was mad all over the castle. She was screaming at her kids and shaking them. She was plotting against Rhaenyra. She was like that. She spent that whole season just pissed off and unhinged and trying to stab people, wanting to cut out a baby's eye because her child's eye got. She was completely unhinged. Characters should change and they should transform, but I don't understand what happened to transform that unhinged character into this paragon of guilt and desiring absolution. And I picked the wrong side. You picked the side your kids were on. I mean, do you have a lot of choice, right? Like, she set things in motion when her kids were babies by positioning herself against and because of what? Because she lied to you about sleeping with a guy, right? It's done. What's done is done. And I just don't buy it. I don't buy that the character who was so afraid for her children's lives because her father told her that if Rhaenyra came to power, she would have to put her children to death, right? So I don't buy that the same woman who lived her life with that fear and made so many decisions out of her fear would less than a year later go to Rhaenyra, give consent for her eldest child to be beheaded, give over victory in a war that would probably also kill the rest of her sons, as well as her brother, her father. And then after all that, ask Rhaenyra to run away with her. What? There was this part in this scene with Alicent and Rhaenyra in the last episode where right after they agree that Aegon needs to die, her own child, she says, "Come with me." What? I really thought I heard it wrong. I really thought I didn't hear that. And everyone talks about what a great actress Olivia Cooke is. And I mean, I think she is a great actress, but those lines were just, she just spit out those lines like she did not believe it, right? Like it just seemed like it should have had some pause, some vulnerability. I don't know. It just felt like it came out of nowhere. And maybe paying some kind of fan service to the fans who have been living for the lesbian subtext of Alicent and Rhaenyra and just tossing them something, but it didn't feel authentic to the situation. It didn't feel authentic to the moment. Rhaenyra barely reacted to it. She answered that question like it made sense, like, "Oh no, my place is here. Come with me." I just didn't understand that. I just didn't understand that. The time for the Rhaenyra Alicent ship has come and gone. That came and went first season. Alicent getting a redemption arc, I just don't buy it. And so I think that that scene was supposed to be the emotional complex, it was supposed to be the emotional climax of the finale. So we didn't get a battle, we didn't get any deaths. So I think that that scene was supposed to be the climax, but it didn't feel like that because it just wasn't believable. It just was not believable to me. What did she get in that deal? She said, "I want to take my daughter and my granddaughter." Okay, you could have done that without coming to Rhaenyra and selling out your son. You want to protect the small folk? I don't believe any of you care about the small folk. None of you care. Let's stop pretending. None of you, none of these nobles, all these people fighting. If you care about the small folk, you would just say, you would just let, if Rhaenyra cared about the small folks, she would just let Aegon have it. Just let him have the throne, right? Because what's going to happen to the people, how much they're going to suffer for her to fight for it, it's not worth it if you actually cared about the small folk. Like, no one cares. So I'm not going to buy at this point that Alicent cares about the small folk that much. I also feel like, I don't feel like they exactly did a redemption arc with Rhaenyra, but they also just seem to not want to allow Rhaenyra to just, I don't know, she did not have the edge that she had in the first season. Because I've been watching the second season alongside the first season, I've been watching young Rhaenyra. Young Rhaenyra was feisty. She was decisive. She was a military strategist. Even adult Rhaenyra in the second half of the first season was a military strategist. We should have secured the stepstones. We should have left troops there. We should have done reinforcements, right? She was decisive. She knew what she was talking about. What happened? What happened? In this second season, she's just spent this whole season being indecisive, insecure, unsure of herself, getting disrespected by her council, not knowing what to do. In that conversation with Massaria, she's like, "I never learned how to wage battle because I'm a woman. I don't know how to hold a sword." So many powerful women in this franchise have not known how to fight, have not known how to hold a sword, right? Daenerys, she could fight with dragons, but she wasn't a fighter until season 8 decided to suddenly make it seem like she knew how to use a sword. Sansa didn't know how to use a sword, but she was a very powerful character. Cersei was very powerful. She didn't know how to use a sword. What is this? Where is this coming from? Right? When the first season, Rhaenyra was willing to ride her dragon and roll up to her uncle and check him. Why didn't she do that second season? Right? And that whole arc of Daemon and Rhaenyra arguing and him leaving and him having a really hard time securing the river run, and of her not being sure where his loyalties lied and whether he was actually securing the Riverlands for her. That was all show. That was all adaptation, right? The only thing the book tells, well, again, I read an abridged version of the book, so there could be things that I could be missing because I didn't actually read Fire and Blood. I read an abridged, illustrated, like compilation version of it. However, all that told us was that Damon secured the Riverlands, not how. So if you created this whole arc of this tension between them and not being sure what his intentions were, we also could have had a moment of Rhaenyra actually just checking him, like rolling up on him and checking him. I don't know. I just didn't know who this character was. Even the assassination scene when she's cowering and crying while the men are fighting, they just made her very weak. So if people don't remember, there was a scene after Rhaenyra and Mysaria had been moving in their plot to stir up the unrest in King's Landing, and they sent food to the people who were starving because of the blockade. And I felt like this should have been a moment of triumph for Rhaenyra. Like, one of your plans is working, right? And this is something that none of your male counselors came up with, right? This is something that you and Massaria are doing, right? That I think is actually going to be really helpful to your efforts. But she's still in there moaning and groaning about not knowing what to do next and not being sure she's doing the right thing. And Damon, she doesn't know what Damon's doing. Everyone thinks she needs Damon. I'm like, because you're acting like you need him, right? But I thought that this scene was the perfect opportunity for Massaria to remind Rhaenyra of who she was. Like I said, I've been watching the seasons alongside each other, so I'm getting a dose of young Rhaenyra every week, as I watch the new season. Young Rhaenyra rode up to Daemon on her dragon when he had taken over Dragonstone and taken her brother's egg and got the castle and the egg back just by reading him the filth. And Massaria was standing right there when she did it. So I just thought that when Rhaenyra is saying, oh, everyone thinks I need Daemon, I don't know what Daemon is doing, he's betraying me, that was the perfect opportunity for Massaria to say, I remember a young girl who landed on her dragon and made Damon back down and scared the shit out of me. Right? Because after that, I think it's when Massaria kind of breaks up with Damon because she's like, you're telling these people I'm pregnant. They might kill me. I just could not believe that the writers didn't think a different crop of writers in the first season. Did they forget what happened? I just did not understand that. To me, that would have been such a great wraparound, right? This Massaria, this character who Rhaenyra only knew as this like whore, right? That Damon is supposedly trying to marry and give her brother's egg to their baby. That's the only way she knew her. Now she's become one of her most trusted advisors. What a full circle moment to reference back to. Instead of doing that, they decided to have Massaria trauma dump a story about getting raped by her father and then have them make out. I just don't understand. First of all, we didn't need to hear that story. We didn't need to hear that story. And again, I think it's going along with this whole idea of making everybody so much more sympathetic. And one of the key ways that TV makes people sympathetic is to tell us about the character's trauma. One of the shows that I watch, one of the trash shows that I watch is Love is Blind. Love is Blind is this dating show where people sit down in these like boxes where they can't see each other and get to know each other and they get engaged before they ever see each other. And one of the things I've noticed is there is a tradition in a certain episode each season where people just start talking about all their trauma, right? Like my abortion, my father dying, my this, my that. And I really do think they have some kind of prompt back there of things they're supposed to talk about. And there's like a day where they're also supposed to talk about their traumatic experiences. And they show like the other character reacting to it. And this is supposed to signal intimacy because in the world of dating shows, talking about trauma equals intimacy. Talking about trauma doesn't equal intimacy. It doesn't necessarily mean that I trauma dump to Uber drivers and may never tell my family and friends the same thing. It's not what you think it is. That moment was not what they thought it was. They wanted that to be a bonding moment, I guess, but I just felt like it was unnecessary and it undermined Massaria's agency. Trigger warning, sexual trauma, incest. When she told this story about her father raping and impregnating her, she then says she woke up with this scar, right? And unable to bear children. In the first season, when Damon was lying, saying she was pregnant, Massaria told Damon, I made sure that pregnancy was something I would never be bothered with. So it suggests that she did something, right? She did something to make sure that she would never have a baby. She did something. She found a way to sterilize herself somehow, right? She took her fertility, her autonomy over her body into her own hands. This story that she tells to Rhaenyra makes it seem like it was something that was done to her. And that undermines what was set up in the first season, which is why sometimes I wonder if it's completely different writers or they didn't go back and review. You shouldn't be having those kind of continuity issues with modern television. So a lot of the things that I like to watch are episodic TV, Xena, Buffy. Those are the things I like to go back and watch. So there's inconsistencies all over the place because over the course of 24 episodes, a season, 6 to 8 seasons, some of these shows, yeah, there's going to be incontinuities. There's going to be stuff that's made up on the spot. It's going to get wacky. With the way storytelling is now in TV, where we get 6, 8 episodes every 2 years, there is no excuse for that. And why do that? Why do that to that character? And then having them make out, I didn't like it. And it's not about not wanting to see queer representation. It just didn't feel authentic to that moment. The chemistry didn't really feel like it was there. I think they took so long to get into the kiss because they were trying to figure out how to get into the kiss because the moment for it wasn't natural. I just told you about being raped. Is that a sexy moment? I don't know. I don't feel like that's a sexy moment. And then we never hear of it again. They make out, it gets interrupted. Then we've had what, 2, 3 more episodes, and we've gotten nothing else about like any kind of romance or anything with Masari. So for what? This show hasn't been very sex heavy. We don't really have a lot of characters. Well, actually, no. We've got Kristen and Allison all the time, right? So I don't know. I just feel like they just wanted to throw in some more sex and it didn't feel like it fit. And it felt like the direction of the scene undermined the agency of both of those characters. My review of the first half of the season, I talked about how one of the directors talked about what the difference is in this show is the centering of the woman's perspective. And for the first few episodes, I was with that, right? When we were still kind of tamping up to war and there were still these attempts at negotiation and trying to do it in a certain way, I was with that to a certain extent. By the time babies' heads are getting cut off in their beds, it's a wrap. You're at war. And it's interesting that this idea that this show is more anchored in a woman's perspective, but the showrunners are still men. I know they've got female writers, but I feel like it's still male dominated. Do you really know what a woman's perspective is? One of the things I've been seeing people say in comment sections when some of us are commenting on the defanging of Rhaenyra, of both women actually, of Alicent and Rhaenyra, the sort of softening of both of them this season, the taking the edge off of both of them. One of the things have seen people say about Rhaenyra is, well, she's a mom now. She's had 3 kids. She's she's softer now, right? Because she's a mom. And she's had all these kids and hard pregnancies and she's worn out. And it's the kind of thing that someone says who's not a mother. What do y'all think about motherhood? Do you think that motherhood makes you weak? Do you think that motherhood makes you less fierce? Do you know what you have to be to keep a human being alive in this world? And I can only speak from my perspective as a mother, but I know that motherhood, I used to have a blog called Warrior Mama where I wrote about my experiences with special needs parenting and how I feel like I have to fight. I have to fight for my son so hard, and I have to fight all kinds of people. I have to fight people that I never even expected to have to fight just to justify him being born. I vividly remember around the time I first found out I was pregnant, I was probably just like a few weeks, maybe a month in, and I was commuting to Riverside where I did my PhD, and I almost got hit by a truck in a parking lot. Someone was kind of rushing through too fast, didn't see me. I had to jump out of the way, and the truck zoomed off. But I had this very visceral picture in my mind of if I could have got into the window of that truck, I would have pulled that man out of the truck by like through the window and like torn open his throat with my teeth. I saw myself doing this. Of course I didn't, right? I now doubt my physical ability to do that, but in that moment, I was absolutely sure I could do it. I was absolutely sure I could do it because I was filled with such rage that he had almost harmed me and the life that I was carrying. I have never been stronger. I have never been fiercer. I have never been more ready to die, and I have never been more ready to kill since I became a mother. So, this idea that motherhood has softened Rhaenyra, no, that's not it. I don't know. I don't know the writers. Do they want her to be likable? Do they want us to see Rhaenyra as the protagonist of the show even more so than she already was? I don't quite understand it, but I don't see why you would do this with your major female character. I don't buy that these people care about the small folk. Right. And then there's been a lot of back and forth. Rhaenyra was very hesitant. She didn't want to go too far. But then episode 7, we get the reaping or the sowing. When she took all of those people, all of these relatives of hers, the Targaryen bastards, and just threw them all at the dragon at once, knowing that it was going to be a massacre because she was finally decisive and that committed to achieving the goal of getting more dragon riders. She was committed to the point that she didn't do no interviews first. She didn't find out who these people are. I'm like, how easily would it have been that one of them was an agent for Aegon? And the plan was to come get one of these big dragons and take it back. They didn't talk to them. They didn't ask who they were. They didn't see where they will actually be in the line of succession. I would think that you probably don't want to put somebody on the dragon who has a better claim than your son. Jace was hella classist and it was borderline racist with his reaction to the dragon riding plot, but he wasn't wrong, right? Actually, if we know Jace is not actually the son of Lenore Velaryon. So technically, does Hugh have a better claim and now he has the biggest dragon in the kingdom? She was so decisive and committed to this that she just went for it, massacred all these people, didn't do no interviews, right? Give me some more dragon riders, no matter what it takes. There was a lot of allusion to the cultish aspect of episode 7 of The Reaping, that it was like she was giving a sacrifice to the dragon. So she was taking on this very religious, cultish element of justifying her actions through the will of the gods. Okay, great. Morally gray, despicable. I'm with it, right? Like, I'm not with what she did, but it's interesting to watch a character who I think has somewhat, you know, tried to care about human life. It's interesting to watch a character who had been someone who seemed like they cared do something like that. But then the next episode, she's talking about, oh, I just wanted the new Dragon Riders to be a deterrent. What? There's just so much back and forth. And I just feel like we keep having these points that seem like, okay, here's a turn. We're going in, the character has reached this certain point, and now we're going down this path, and then they backtrack. Now, does that happen in real life? Sure. How many times have I started my diet? How many times have I started my workout plan? How many times have I started my resolutions to really crack down and make progress on many of the goals that I have for myself? In real life, people go back and forth. We don't watch television for real life, right? I think we engage with art, with television, with books for truth, but not necessarily minute by minute reality, right? I want truth, but I don't want reality. Yes, people go back and forth and waffle in reality. I need characters to move forward. I need things to progress. And one of my biggest complaints about the season was that it felt like characters were hitting the same character beat over and over and over and over again without us getting forward movement. I did a master's in creative writing. It was actually a master's in professional writing was what it was called, but it was a creative writing degree. We took classes. I was a fiction concentration, but I took classes in playwriting, poetry, everything. And my playwriting class is what taught me the most about storytelling. And really, every single scene there in a properly written play, You cannot remove a single scene. Now, sometimes there's comic scenes, right? Shakespeare has comic scenes that maybe aren't necessary to the action, but they're necessary for like tonal balance in the play. But for the actual plot driven scenes, you cannot remove a single scene without disrupting things. Everything should be necessary. Everything that you put and focus on in the scene needs to come into play at some point, needs to be used. Right. So, one of the really, and I don't remember who first said this, but one of the really popular directives about playwriting is if there is a gun hanging on the wall of the set, then before the play is over, that gun needs to go off. Like it needs to be used. So I felt like this season of the show, the gun never went off. The gun just never went off, right? The scenes, we got the same scene of Rhaenyra's counsel being disrespectful and telling her she needs to do this and that, and her saying, I'll think about it, and not doing anything. We got that scene several times. We got Damon having nightmares at Harrenhal several times. I don't understand why we needed him sleeping with his mother. I do kind of see the sequential progression in the scenes with and how he kind of reconciled with Viserys by the end of his time at Harrenhal, but we didn't need him sleeping with his mama. We didn't need that. I felt like we got a lot of scenes of Allison being racked with guilt. You're not telling us anything new. And even that final scene with Rhaenyra and Allison that I think the showrunners thought, oh, this is juicy. Like they're going to love this. I think most of us were like, what did we get out of that new? We didn't really get anything new. Some of my other complaints, Nettles and Raina. So if you are a book reader, you know that there is another dragon seed character that has not been written into the show yet, and that is Nettles. And Nettles was described as a small or a thin brown girl, a foul-mouthed brown girl who of dubious parentage, like no one knows. Does she have Targaryen ancestry? We don't know. Was able to tame the wild dragon sheep stealer by bringing it a freshly slaughtered sheep every morning. And she becomes very important in the action of the war as she is riding, I think, one of the larger dragons in Sheep Stealer. So it appears that what is happening, right, is that the character Nettles is not going to be in the show and that she has been merged with Rhaena, who is the daughter of Daemon Targaryen and Laena Velaryon. And this season, Rhaena was sent to the Vale along with Rhaenyra's children. And she was supposed to go with her little brothers to Pentos and take care of them. And these are her little brothers. These aren't just Rhaenyra's kids. These are Rhaena's half brothers because they are the sons of Daemon, her father. So it's not like these are just Rhaenyra's kids. These are your little brothers who you were supposed to be responsible for and take care of. This season, we saw her become aware that there is a wild dragon. Rhaena does not have a dragon. I feel like the entire character description of Rhaena is Rhaena doesn't have a dragon. Like, what else do we know about Rhaena? She doesn't have a dragon. Now, I do think there is this father-daughter thing going on where it seems like Daemon ignored Rhaena as opposed to her sister because her dragon egg never hatched and she's not a dragon rider. So I do think that tied up in her desire for a dragon is possibly the desire for her father's love and attention. But we haven't gotten anything since season 1 with her saying, oh, father ignores me. We haven't gotten anything else that tells us that. Like we've gotten no scenes with Rhaena and Daemon. We haven't heard her mention him. So literally the whole of her character is the girl without a dragon. And it's just bad. It's very one-dimensional. There's very little care. The showrunner said, "Oh, we're really invested in this character because we really wanted to explore what is it like to be a Targaryen without a dragon and to claim a dragon as an adult. We really wanted to show that because we thought that would be exciting." And I'm just like, is that it? Is that all this character is to you, the girl without a dragon? Clearly it is because that's all you've given us. Is this girl randomly running away from her little brothers. Nobody seems to look behind and check on her or send some soldiers after her. Or, hey, where are you going? Or nothing. And running after this wild dragon, no lines for the whole 8 episode. And I thought that was terrible. And I do feel some kind of way about them merging the Nettles and Arena storyline because Nettles, at least how she's described as a brown, small brown girl, and how she's depicted in the fan art, as well as the illustrations in the Rise of the Dragon book that I read, as a Black girl. So it's giving like interchangeable. It's giving you felt like, oh, they're not going to miss this Black girl. And we already have this Black girl. So let's just mix them together. I know that the purpose of this is to get a character who we already know, as in Reyna, into the main action of the story quicker because in the book, Reyna eventually hatches a dragon egg, but that dragon isn't going to come into maturity until after the war. So I know the purpose of this is to take a character we already have and get her into the action more quickly. But I just don't like it because you're sacrificing one Black character for another one. And even though I appreciate that they made the Valarians Black, I don't like the idea that, okay, that's enough. That's enough Black people. We don't need any more. It reminds me of the Little Mermaid casting when Holly was first cast. A lot of Black celebrities were putting in their bids for other roles, right? So Lizzo posted a video of her singing Unfortunate Souls, like, come on, get me for Ursula. The guy who plays the dad on Everyone Hates Chris. I can't think of that actor's name, but he put in his bid for Trident. Everyone was putting in their bids, but it became very clear that we've got this Black girl in the starring role. This ain't about to be a Black movie. Okay, we're going to get Sebastian. We're going to give you one sister. Oh, we gave you the queen, who isn't even a character in the original, so no one really cares, right? Like, that's it, right? And yeah, it's giving that energy like, oh, there's enough Black people. We don't need this Black girl. And I just think there were opportunities for involving Reyna more in the story without her claiming sheep stealer. I think they could have developed some interesting politics because Reyna in the book, she spends the war in the Vale. They could have developed some interesting politics there. Or they could have just let Reyna be a small character. I almost rather that than you give her this sloppy, horribly executed storyline. It's just terrible. It was absolutely terrible. She ran around all episode and then comes face to face with the dragon, and then we don't even get to see her claim it. I saw people describe this season as edging. And I'm not going to explain edging because it's not that kind of podcast, but like edging without the payoff because everything was a cliffhanger in the final episode. And yes, you absolutely can end a season with a cliffhanger, right? One of my favorite shows ever, Jane the Virgin, it ends the first season with a cliffhanger when Jane gives birth to her baby and the baby gets kidnapped outside of the hospital, right? That's a cliffhanger. But before this cliffhanger, the baby is born, right? So she gets pregnant with the baby in the first episode. And in the finale, the baby is born, right? So you've got pregnancy, birth. You've got the payoff, right? You have the payoff for the conflict that was set up in the beginning or for the major storyline that was set up in the beginning. You have the payoff, and then the cliffhanger opens up a new storyline to take you into the second season. You still get a little bit of closure before you get the new opening. The finale gave us none of that. It gave us no closure on anything. All it did was open stuff up, but it gave us no closure. And that leaves you very frustrated, right? Rather than leave you excited to see what happens next. My last complaint, the Song of Ice and Fire, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So the Song of Ice and Fire is the whole prophecy about the Principal's promise who will fight the dark side of the White Walkers. The reasons why the references to the Song of Ice and Fire don't work for me is because season 8 of the original show was terrible and we got no payoff for that prophecy. We didn't get a big, satisfying, epic payoff for their prophecy. In a sense, I guess you could say that Jon Snow was the Song of Ice and Fire because he was the son of the Starks of the Winter Ice and the Targaryens Fire. And he's the one who pulled the realm together in order to defeat the White Walkers and stop the long winter from happening. So, in a sense, I guess you could say the prophecy was fulfilled, but I don't know. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't fulfilled in a satisfying way. And John didn't have to be king to do that. He wasn't king. No one even found out or knew that he was Aegon. Did they name him Aegon? I don't remember. But no one even found out he was a Targaryen, right? He didn't have to be king to unite the realm. The Lannisters were in charge of the realm when that happened. So this whole idea that a Targaryen needs to be ruling in order to fulfill the Song of Ice and Fire, if Jon uniting Westeros in order to defeat the White Walkers was the fulfillment of that prophecy, then it doesn't actually connect. You don't actually need a Targaryen to be ruling for the prophecy to be fulfilled if it was. And if the prophecy wasn't fulfilled, I don't know. I don't like the references to it because it just reminds me how terrible the show ended this incredible epic story. And I don't want to be reminded. I just think it's really cheap to show clips of another show within a show from the same franchise. It just feels very gimmicky, and it feels like you thought we were going to be excited about that. And everyone I know who loves the show hated the final season. Everyone I know who loves the show was really dissatisfied with what they did with the prophecy elements of the show. We don't want to be reminded. And I don't think that that should have been necessary for Daemon to complete this redemption arc of recommitting himself to Rhaenyra. I just don't think it was necessary. I think that merely what he had already been through in Viserys handing him the crown, do you still want it after he actually had to make a hard decision? I think that that was enough. I just don't think it was necessary. And I think that the references to Song of Ice and Fire bring up the issue, I think, that is in both the shows and the books. I think that George R. Martin's desire to do this huge epic fantasy while at the same time subverting the genre, I think sometimes those things come up against each other, right? The subversion of the genre within the genre, I think, come up against each other and create some tensions and conflicts that are hard to resolve. And I think one of the ways we know it's hard to resolve is because he can't seem to finish it, right? I think that the mystical elements of Song of Ice and Fire, and now I'm talking about the whole thing, the books, the shows, everything, the mystical elements of the prophecy, the dreams, the destiny, the blood magic, right? The magic of old Valyria, all of that stuff sometimes comes up against the political messaging, which is that people get into power through violence and whoever wins is whoever wins, right? Like there is no destiny, there is no fate. Whoever wins, whoever wins. That's what Alicent basically said earlier in the season. Aegon will win or Rhaenyra will win, and they'll each create their own story about why it was meant to be. But it's just whoever's stronger is who's going to win. And so I feel like this is part of the political message of the whole Game of Thrones project. However, we've also got all this magical stuff going on that tempts us to believe in chosen ones and in the destiny of these various characters. And it leads to inconsistencies, right? So we've got even the Dragon Sea storyline has exposed some inconsistencies with the dragon lore and about who can bond to a dragon, how to tame a dragon, how to claim a dragon. On one hand, do you need Targaryen blood? Can only Targaryens ride dragons? Is it destiny? Or is it just the fact that only Targaryens are given dragons, right? So they grow up believing it's their birthright to ride dragons, or they're giving dragons as babies hatched out of the egg so they imprint on one another. So they're giving the opportunity to create the bond, and that's why they can do it. And actually, anybody can do it if given the opportunity. And neither the books or the show are kind of willing to resolve that. And I mean, I think it's possible for things to coexist. But I do think that when you're making something, you need to know what your overriding central messaging and theme is. I don't feel like nobody knows that. I don't think George R. Martin knows.
I don't think the showrunners and the original Game of Thrones run knows, and I don't think the people making this show know either. And being that I have read this story and I know where it ends, I think that this feeling of dissatisfaction that a lot of the viewers have is it's not going to be the last time. It is not going to be the last time we feel that because at the end of the day, it's kind of like Agan said, what's the point? What was the point anyway? So will I be watching season 3? Yes, of course. Yes. I'll be watching it. It's still one of the best things on television, even with all the faults. But I just have thoughts and I have analysis and I just needed to get it out. So if you have listened to this, thank you. I hope it made sense. I hope it was enjoyable. And I will be back talking about mermaid shit next week.
You have just listened to the Merwomanist podcast with Mommy Melusine. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, I would love 5 stars, and subscribe for future episodes. You can follow me on Instagram at mommy, that's MAMI, _Melusine, or at Merwomanist Podcast, on LinkedIn at Jalandra Davis, or my website, jalandradavis.com. Wishing you love and laughter and hoping to see you swim this way again.